this is ridiculous,
Exactly.
I'd go to the grocery store just because I needed to, and then I'd see all these things out, and so I'd take pictures of them and say, oh my gosh, and it wasn't even here.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
a whole different attitude.
mm-hmm. Well, nobody, I mean, in Eastern North Carolina in particular, we hardly ever get snow. So nobody knows how to drive in it. And, my thing would be, well, okay, so stay home,
Exactly. It's not going to last long. So stay home.
It doesn't. It doesn't. No.
You can have snow plows?
Yes, they do. Yeah. I think they lay dormant for a long time, but yeah, they're available.
Yeah, exercise them once a year, I guess, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. They just practice. They do know how to put salt on the road. But the thing is, if you salt the roads and then it rains, you've wasted that whole effort.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I mean, at least that's my thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Okay, we're going to get started here
about salting Lake Michigan. We're overusing salt in some of the cities.
Wow.
Yeah. We're careful here where we're at, but we do a salt sand mixture by us. All right, we're going to get started here this morning. It's 10 o'clock. Marty, can you let Hubert in?
I'm working on that, yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So welcome everybody to the Digital Forum. Good to see everyone here. We're going to have we got something.
Some kind of feedback there, Jeff.
Yeah, I don't know. Is it?
Sounds like a chipmunk.
Yeah.
Did you say chickmunk?
Chipmunk.
Yeah, it could have been somebody's microphone with feedback. So welcome again. Good to see everybody here. Looks like we're going to have a good group today. We're up to 38 already and a nice sized panel. I got a couple announcements before we get started. I hope everybody had a good Christmas and holiday season. If you guys watched my video, I did have a thing on password vaults and that. I want to make sure everybody does not use LastPass. After all my talk about it, that group got hacked and they actually were able to get into the vault because LastPass would let them constantly attack the vault until they came up with the password that worked to get in. So do not use LastPass, use 1Password, mSecure, your own computer system, whatever. So just a warning on that. Things change quick in 1 month's time. And I had it on good authority that LastPass was a pretty good password manager, and they're probably going to go bankrupt in the next year because everybody's leaving them in big droves. We've got a good list of speakers this month, including today. We have Jamie here talking on infrared. Next month, we have Jim Kopnick, who's an aviation photographer here in Wisconsin. He's shot for EAA and does quite a lot on good aviation photography. In March, we have Mike Mazul talking about volcano photography. So that should be real interesting. And
field trip for that one, Jeff?
Yeah, should we do a field trip to a volcano? We all go to Hawaii or something. April, we have Drema's going to talk about photo pills. So that should be a good one. And May, I'm still working on. June, I have a Keith Lisk who put out a book. He actually sent me a copy on the Great Smoky Mountain National Park, a panoramic perspective but he's going to talk about how he went about putting this book out and the ins and outs, the good and bad parts of it. He learned a lot, he said, from putting the book together. So he will be in June. And that's as far as I've gotten so far. So hopefully I'll get stuff worked out the rest of the year. And hang on a second. I got a friend that's
Here,
trying to
kitty.
mess up my controls.
That's what I was hearing. I thought I was hearing a cat.
Yep. He comes down and bothers.
That wasn't feedback, Jeff. That was just your cat.
Just my cat making noise, right? Yeah. So, so that's what we got going for Digital Forum. We're going to be quite a busy group. So that's good. And let's see, what else did I have? Oh, and something that's been passing around, Roger Krill got it from our camera club, Menominee Falls, where we're getting these emails sent by somebody else, but using the person's name. Actually, it was our newsletter. Come on. Oh, my guy likes to be on my computer stuff. So keep an eye out. It is nothing that you should ever reply to. I've gotten it for our president from WACO, who says, I'm busy at a meeting, but I need to talk to you by email. Please contact me. And if you don't check the header of who actually sent that email, you'll find that it's really not the person that sent it. So watch when somebody sends you something.
I've actually received those with Mary's name on it here in the last week or so. Yeah. So
Ramona
it's
did
going
too.
on. It's happening quite a bit. So I thought, well, we'll let everybody know that it's going on, because I don't know what happens if you'd actually respond to it, but it probably would be a good thing not to respond. But I always check headers when I see these emails and they sound a little strange. I check to see what the email address actually is. And a lot of times I have found that it isn't the person that sent it. And you could tell because the English isn't quite right, usually, or that's not how that person talks. So, but since we have all our emails on our, on the different websites, it really is a problem. And so is my cat. He's really getting to be a pain today. He wants to go out and I'm not taking him outside. So, so that's all I had. Let's get started. We got a question from Eric. Yeah, Tony, did you have something?
You mentioned M-Secure, and I've been using that for several years. And you can use it on PC, mobile device, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Use a password to get into it, and I keep a file on Dropbox, and you have to have rights to Dropbox also. So we can access our information anywhere we can get Wi-Fi in the world. And it seems to be very, very good. So I just thought I'd let you know that
good. Yeah.
I've been a many years user.
Yeah, I've been using it quite a long time. I actually keep it in iCloud so that it's even protected more than Dropbox. And that's why I like M-Secure for Password Manager, is it isn't stored on their server at all. You can put it on whatever server location you want. So, but yeah, it's a lot of different ways to do passwords, but if you're like me, I have 700 of them. So, and I'm going to constantly have a problem with this cat, I guess.
Maybe it's hungry. Maybe it wants some milk.
No, he's been fed. He just likes to go outside. He's an outdoor cat that has gotten old and now likes to be indoors. So, and he loves to roll around on all my cables on top of my desk. So if we lose me, we know why. He pushed a button on the keyboard or something, but maybe he'll be quiet here laying here. I took his seat. A lot of times he sleeps in my chair. So, but, so let's,
Jeff, all of us people with cats share your pain. Let me tell you, mine might show up too. I don't know.
Yeah.
Seems to want to show up when I'm on Zoom. So.
Yeah. He used to hate people, and now as he's gotten older, he was a wildcat. Somebody just dumped him in our front yard and dumped a whole litter. Out here in the country, we get litters of cats dumped all the time. So my sister made friends with this one. So he's an indoor-outdoor cat. But now as he's about 9 years old, he says, I like it indoors more than out. But okay, Eric Nelson is asking a question. Are there any of you who use a light meter app like Light Meter Pro? I've gotten my first smartphone, an Apple iPhone SE, and am curious about light meter apps. So I gotta admit, I don't use any light meter apps. I use physical light meters. Anybody use a light meter app?
I have it on my phone, but I've only with it. I've never really used it like you would a regular light meter.
Yeah. I got to admit, I find using a regular light meter easier than using probably on an app on my phone. I've had my light meters for years. Once you get a good one, it's easy enough to carry around.
So question, in the age of mirrorless cameras, when and why would you use the light meter?
Eric is not using a mirrorless camera. Eric does the colloid process. He's using large format cameras, so he needs a light meter.
Yeah, he does 8x10 wet plates a lot of times, and creates his own creates his own emulsion on glass and on metal, and his process is very interesting. Someday we'll probably have him on to talk about that a little bit, because it is an interesting old-time process. But Eric, sorry, don't have too much. I haven't used Light Meter Pro. I've always just...
Is there any situation where with a mirrorless camera it would be an advantage?
I don't know. These days, I think the mirrorless cameras or any of the cameras have such good light meter systems. You do always have to know when to override what a light meter is going to do. So you still need to interpret it.
Plus, we have histograms.
Yeah, the histograms on the camera. Yeah, Hubert.
Yeah, they come in handy for me if I'm doing portraits with flash. So that's basically what I use it for. So, and
yeah, that's probably the same.
Because what you want there, you want the light that's coming onto a particular position. All the meters and most of the cameras I'm aware of are all reflective type of meters. So, but with the flash meter, you can set your flash up, and you get an idea if you're on or not. So, especially if you're doing a portrait sessions, it just saves you a lot of time on setup time playing around.
Right. Yeah, you're right. And that's a lot of what I used to use my light meter for. They are flash meters. I've got an old Sekonic one and a Minolta one that I use. And once you get them, they do last a long time. So you buy a good one, you'll have it forever. Both of mine, I think, are 25, 30 years old. So, okay, well, yeah, your GE 1940 light meter is getting a little old. You might look at trying to find a good Sekonic one that's out there. they last a long time, and you probably can find them used in a lot of spots. Okay, guy, I don't need you to disconnect me. He keeps opening up extra windows on my computer. Okay. Yeah, and Eric, if you look at Sekonic, is probably one of the major light meter companies out there, and they do make a flash and light meter combined. I can't tell you the model number off the top of my head, but they're fairly easy to work.
I've got a Sekonic you can borrow to test it out and see before you buy one. But we could talk about that Wednesday night in that meeting.
There you go. So, okay, great. We have more here. Okay. Anybody else have questions? Come on. There must be some things for us to talk about here today before we get to Jamie.
I'll throw a question out there. This is especially for Nikon Z users. I mean, right now, the longest tele they've got goes out to 400, the 100 to 400 millimeter. Just wondering if anybody has used a non-Nikon, like a Tamron or something, 600 millimeter with a Nikon Z camera, and just wondered how that works out in terms of focus speed and focusing, things like that.
Well, I know I put on.
I'm a Nikon Z user. I have a Z6 II and the Z6, and the FTZ adapter works really well. From what I understand, though, you really have to check and see whether each third-party company has updated their firmware to communicate well with the Zs. I learned about that with my macro lens, that Tamron had updated my 90. So I had to send it in for them to do that. So it's possible, but you probably have to double check with the company. But the FTZ adapters work really well. And I had a 2 to 500, and I sold that for the 100 to 400Z simply because I don't do a lot of long lens work, but 400 works well for me, and it's much easier to manage physically.
Yeah, and I've used the 200 to 500 Nikon with the adapter, and that's worked fine. None of the other lens manufacturers have come up with a Z mount yet. Hopefully Tamron or Sigma will start doing that. So anybody else have any experience with it? I know it's a slightly slower with the 200 to 500, but it still focuses pretty quick. Or even my 200 to 400 f4, it still focuses fairly fast. Even with that and a 1.4 converter on it, it's, that lens is a really fast focusing lens, so it does work well that way. We might next month be able to talk. Jim is a Sigma photographer, and I know he was just experimenting with Sigma's new 60 to 600 zoom lens. So I'm sort of curious to see what he has to say about that lens. Because that
10
could be a
10 to 1, that's amazing.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, you get a really great range in that. You could basically almost buy just two lenses, an ultra wide and then the 60 to 600, you got a zoom, super zoom.
I just bought a 50 to 400 Tamron, and it's beautiful. I love it. It's phenomenal. Yeah. Very
What
fast
are
focusing.
you using that on, Mary? What's your body?
Sony that I just bought. So I just bought a Sony A7 IV. So it's my year to buy cameras last year. I think I bought 4.
Tamron glass has always been good glass.
Yeah. I've always really been happy with my Nikon. I was always really happy with the Tamron lenses that I used for that. So I tried it, and it's a great range, huge range. So just back from a workshop and a trip to Arizona, and it was phenomenal. So that's about the only lens I used. I had 2. I bought 2 for it, but I have a short zoom and the 50-400, and the 50-400 was just amazing. So
yeah, no, I haven't tried any of those. I've been sticking with Nikon lenses, but I know from the past when I used to sell Tamron lenses, that Tamron used to make a lot of the glass for Nikon. So especially in the long lenses. So I know they're a pretty good lens manufacturer, and Sigma at one time wasn't known for their good quality glass, but today they've moved up quite a bit from what they used to be. So
yeah, they got that arts glass now.
Yeah. It's funny how things have changed over 30-year time period. How companies can go from mediocre to good, and from good down to mediocre. At one time, Vivitar used to make some super lenses back 30, 40 years ago, and they were some of the best lenses out there. And nowadays, now they're not even around, but it's just not, they just started going downhill all of a sudden. And Tamron, though, has always been good. So
yeah, Tamron just came out with a lens for Nikon. It's a wide angle lens. I think it's 17-35 or something in that range. And I think they're going to be doing some more lenses for Nikon. I think they now have permission from Nikon to make some Z lens lenses. So, yeah. But I don't know what they have that is actually telephoto at this point that's working on the Z bodies.
I think they have a 70-300, but it's a variable f-stop and more in their lower end line stuff. But yeah, it's starting to get out there now that Nikon is catching up with the mirrorless cameras. I think we're going to start seeing both companies start making lenses for it soon. So
what I notice is, at least with the third-party lenses, Tamron or Sigma, sometimes it's like half the cost as, let's say buying Sony or Nikon or even Canon. Well, Canon's like no more third parties.
Yeah, Canon actually is sort of getting to be tough for getting third-party lenses for their new mirrorless series for some reason. Don't know what it is, but
it's like Apple. Yeah. Like Apple products.
Yeah, it's maybe.
Which is why I went with Sony. It's one reason I went with Sony.
Yeah. Good luck with that. I'm not a Sony fan, so
I am amazed at how fast it was, and I mean, yeah. I shot it the whole. I was used to my D810, and it was just getting so heavy, and so many different lenses and things that I was having to carry all the time, and I just, it's hard to do that when it's not bad when you're in the car, but if you're out of the car and walking around at all, it gets tough. So, This is great. 2 lenses and a body that was just amazing. I was shocked at how perfect almost every single picture is. So, and I was shooting people, active people and animals and everything. And every single one of them was like spot on, for everything. So it was just amazing.
Yep. Yeah. No, Sony certainly had the upper hand for a while, and Nikon's catching up and Canon's in the middle. So
doesn't Nikon use the Sony sensors though?
Yeah, Nikon still uses Sony sensors. So I'm not sure about the Z9. I can't remember on the Z9 whether it's using Sony sensors or not. But Sony does make sensors in that. So for a lot of the cameras, I think a lot of the companies out there, I think maybe even Canon, I'm not sure. But yeah, it's whatever works for you. I'll say that, yeah, Sony's good on what they make. I just won't touch them because of the things that they've done to me in the past that won't let me go to a Sony, anything Sony. So
yeah, it took me 20 years to go back to Sony myself. So
yeah. They like to discontinue stuff and quit supporting it at times when they find it's not profitable. So hopefully they'll keep finding the 35 or this market profitable for photographers, but I know they're putting a lot of their time into the video stuff for the higher end video cameras and that. So we will see. Let's see, do I have anything else? Rick Hawthorne did mention in the Q&A that the FTZ might need to be updated for some lenses. So especially the new Tamron stuff. I know. Oh man, his cat is.
Your cat's gonna get electrocuted with all that cables and that.
Sorry, hey Jeff, just dress him up like a groundhog and put him out there on Tuesday morning, and see where he sees the shadow.
Yeah. Man, he's usually bothers me once and then he leaves for some reason. He's not going away today. Usually he goes upstairs and tries to get out.
For Canon, for third-party lenses, Canon recently sued one of the makers that was making some of the first third-party lenses for their mirrorless cameras, and they don't know the exact reason, but they sued on their patents, and at the moment it sounds like Canon has plans to block out all third-party lenses. There's no one able to make them right now. So it could be quite a while before you see a third-party lens for Canon, or maybe never.
For the mirrorless, that is. I think if you
for the mirrorless
DSLR, you're fine, right?
Yeah.
Well, they've actually been a little bit standoffish on the third parties on their other lenses too. That I had a Sigma, which I went back and forth between Canon and Sigma, trying to get the lens to work correctly, and they never did really get the lens to work with it. And I hear that was a common problem with the 7D camera and third-party lenses, that they did something in the software that was goofing up third-party lenses, and Sigma couldn't fix it, and Canon wasn't going to help them at all.
Yeah, I don't know why they're getting that way. That's can cause a lot of problems. I know I heard about them suing it was one of the Chinese lens manufacturers. I think some of the manual focus lenses that were out there, Samyang or something like that. And there's a bunch of those. I actually used one of them for night sky photography, and it's a nice manual focus, sharp lens. But I don't quite get Canon's thoughts on that, other than maybe the company didn't get patent rights to do it. But
they probably didn't get licensed.
Probably didn't license it right.
Yeah.
But you would think Tamron, because Tamron made lenses for Canon in the past, so you would think they and Sigma would get permission to start making the mirrorless ones, but it doesn't sound like it so far. There's been a lot of stuff on YouTube with that, but no. So
boy, it's pretty quiet here today.
Yeah, we got 44 people here. There've got to be more problems out there than us talking about lenses that sometimes isn't that all that exciting.
Well, I do know for myself, and that a lot of people have been starting to ask me to do photography for them. It'd be kind of interesting to see about asking other people if people have been writing up contracts and that, you know, make sure everything's covered on your half.
Anybody in the group that's been doing that? I know Clint and I have talked about it a little bit on the side.
You know, like when you do weddings or even real estate, you know, or even, let's say, an event, you know, let's say you're working for the state fair.
Yeah, doesn't sound like we got many that are doing that.
I've been staying away from doing work with anybody else.
Yeah. I know with weddings, you really have to do a contract with it, because those can be a nightmare. And I give anybody that does weddings, I applaud them, because I don't have the temperament to deal with wedding people. I worked with a photographer as an assistant for 2-3 years doing weddings, and what I saw got me to know that I'll never do a wedding. I've done 3 in my life, and they've all been close friends that didn't want anything fancy. They just wanted it covered. But I've seen too many people demand so much and then not want to pay for it in the end. And it takes a certain person to be able to deal with setting up groups in a hurry, doing all this stuff. It's a very tough job being a wedding photographer. But that's one that you do need to get. Yeah.
They're exhausting.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, very exhausting, right? But I would recommend looking at PPA's website and see what they have for resources there. It may not be accessible if you're not a member, but that's certainly would be a good resource for finding contracts.
Thank you, Marty. I know Jeff and I talked about that very briefly.
Yeah, or if you're really thinking you're going to get into more and more of that, I mean, it might be worth the membership of PPA just for that. And they do offer insurance through PPA as well. So that might be something to consider.
Yeah, I don't plan on doing the weddings, but, you know, maybe other type, you know, of events
or portraits or stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. But they would have, I think they would have kind of blank contracts for a lot of that type of stuff.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Marty, can you talk a little bit more about the PPA insurance? I just had my camera insurance through State Farm double, and that happened when I moved up here had it through USAA. And I moved up to Milwaukee, and they said that the Milwaukee crime rate was so high, and they doubled my insurance. So I'm canceling. I'm hoping to cancel with State Farm, but I think the PPA insurance is rather limited, and they have a pretty high deductible, as I recall.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I am not a PPA member. I just know it's a benefit of membership. So I unfortunately, I know I cannot speak to that.
I can a little bit. I was a PPA member for 5 years. I never ended up using their insurance. It was limited. The deductible was strange. I ran into problems that I had more equipment than what their coverage would cover. Generally, they'll cover about $15,000 worth of equipment. I carried that at the time that I was working. I carried that just in one bag, and I had 4 or 5 bags worth of equipment. So I had closer to $75,000 worth of equipment. What I found worked out the cheapest was to get a complete business policy from my insurance company that had an inland marine coverage for, which was, I never understand why they call it inland marine. But it was one that you could, it would cover all the equipment that you traveled with. Plus they gave you computer coverage and the works. Oh, Marty, okay, yeah, you're showing what they have.
That
so
go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so it's 15 grand for that. But mine, my total coverage was, which gave me $1 million liability, covered all my equipment, $75,000 worth, all my computer equipment, which was another $35,000 worth, and it was $1,300 a year. And that was, the last one was through State Farm, but as a business policy, not as a personal policy add-on. Now, I just did a personal policy add-on with my State Farm agent, and I only covered $36,000 worth of equipment, and it's $600 a year. So PPA costs you $375 to be a member, and then you get this first tier of coverage.
Then it looks like you can upgrade your coverage from there.
No, well, yeah, they do have more coverage. There's PhotoCare Plus there, Marty.
Yeah, yeah.
If you go to that, that's where you can add on more equipment. The trick is, depending on, you know, what do you want to have covered, and what all the costs end up being. You know, you got to keep in mind you have to be a member of PPA just to get the insurance.
Yeah, there was one, when I Googled it, was Googling it, there was one of the top, I can't remember the name of the company that listed camera insurance, but they wouldn't cover just gear. I called them and they said they were more for businesses and liabilities and that sort of thing. But State Farm, one thing I like about State Farm is that they cover my drone, and I think most companies won't cover drones.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, I mean, I had to play around with State Farm. I dropped all my computer insurance because I just decided that the stuff is in the basement of my house. If I lose my whole house, I'm going to have a lot more problems, and I can probably rebuild all my computer equipment cheaper than if I keep paying the high premium on it. So I figured on self-insuring on that. The camera equipment, I sort of like their policies because you got to watch. A lot of these policies have pretty high deductibles. When I had my business insurance, my deductible was $500, and that's pretty high when it comes to a camera. And I would always fight to get it back down to either $100 or no deductible. My current policy is a no deductible policy, so, and it's replacement value.
And that's still with State Farm?
And that's still with State Farm. So sometimes you need your agent to fight for you a little bit with the home group. Insurance is hard. You got to decide how much to cover and, what the costs are going to be each year compared to putting that same money aside to buy new equipment later, because this stuff depreciates so fast. And if it's not replacement value on that insurance, you won't get much for it.
Yeah. I had a $2,000 lens stolen out of my backpack when I was walking through Buenos Aires. I must admit I was warned not to walk around with camera gear in Buenos Aires. I didn't expect it to be stolen off my back. I guess they tag teamed and opened the zipper a little bit by a little bit. When I got to my destination, I swung my bag around and the top of the bag was open and the lens was gone. But that's when I was with USAA, and I had a check by the time I arrived home.
Yeah, that's what I like about them. That's who I've got. I've got a rider on my homeowners for mine, and it's not that bad. But I don't live in Milwaukee County, so
yeah, that's I have it with my homeowners insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is a good idea to have insurance, especially if you are a photographer going out everywhere, whether it's stolen or dropped in the lake or whatever, get ran over, it's nice to have that.
Yeah, I've had where somebody just walked off with a whole bag of equipment once, and that's a pain. Even trying to remember what you all have in that bag.
That's always the hard part. Yeah.
My insurance company at that time, within 6 weeks had the money for me. At that time, it was a little easier for me. I was running a camera store then, so I just grabbed cameras off the shelf that I needed. But it's still, I had to get paid for sooner or later. But it's so easy. We carry so much equipment in our cars, and you park and you go out hiking. I try to hide it as best I can with blankets and stuff and hope that it's still there when I come back. But
well, there was an article on the segment on the news here in Milwaukee about a week and a half ago. There was a photographer from somewhere northeast or somewhere north, I think up towards Green Bay, that was shooting here in Milwaukee. And he was shooting in the St. Francis area just south. There's a road at the seminary there with the beautiful trees on each side, and it's kind of an iconic shot. And apparently he had about $40,000 worth of gear in his car. And when he went back to his car, another car pulled up behind him. Guy with an assault weapon pulled out and demanded all of his gear. And he was saying when they interviewed him that he got really aggressive with the guy, and he recommended not doing that, which you shouldn't, of course. But the guy ended up, when he got aggressive with him, he ended up pulling an $80 item out of his car, he said, and running off and getting in his car and driving away. But I've always thought that area around St. Francis is a pretty safe area along the lake there.
Well, unfortunately, anywhere in Milwaukee is really not safe.
True.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's why my insurance went up so high when I moved up here from California. I was shocked that it doubled.
I had a couple friends that moved out of Milwaukee County, and their car insurance dropped half the cost in that.
Wow.
Same thing with homeowners insurance.
Yeah, you got cheaper housing moving here from California, but you got to pay for it in other ways.
I like having my house here. I could never buy this house in California.
Yeah.
Insurance question. Does anybody know if a homeowner's rider for photo equipment, is that good internationally for travel overseas?
Oh yeah, it almost always is. Mine was.
Mine is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Probably, but
I would definitely check with your
insurance check with your agent.
Yeah.
Yeah, when that lens was stolen, I actually had a little bit of difficulty language-wise because I figured for the insurance I would need a police report. And I asked the guys and the staff in the hotel, and the local precinct no one spoke English. And so they recommended that I would try to go across Buenos Aires, which was a long way, and go to a precinct where someone spoke English. But I never was able to make that report or get an appointment to do that or whatever. And so when I actually ended up speaking on the phone with the agent here in the US, and he said, just send us something to prove that you're there. And I sent him the itinerary for my flight and my flight boarding pass or whatever, and my itinerary, and they accepted that. They were pretty lenient.
Yeah.
Have you had anything, Mary, that you've had to report for insurance?
Yeah. I slipped on some rocks in Ireland and broke one of my lenses, and no problem. I got it, Yeah, I didn't have to report it or anything because I still had the lens, but it obviously doesn't work. So something happened with the back of it. It just, it looked perfect. It looks perfect, but it just doesn't focus at all, not even manually.
So did they pay for replacing it, or was it a repair?
Yeah, replacement. Yeah. So, and it was $1,200 lens. So, I mean, it was amazing. So, yeah, but USA is really good about that. So, I mean, they paid me to clean up. They said, oh, we'll pay whatever for cleanup. We had a fire in our house, and said, oh, we'll pay for cleanup. And I was like, well, I didn't like the way they acted when I called the cleanup company that they recommended. And because they were all excited about the fact that we had USAA. And so they even got very excited about that. And I was like, no. So I didn't trust them then. So I called my insurance company back again, and they said, well, what are you going to do then? And I said, well, I'll clean it up myself. And they said, well, we'll pay you then. It was great. So they paid for, they just sent me a check. So it was great. So, but they're like that,
Yeah.
So,
what I like to try to do too, in that I like to actually take a picture of my equipment, let's say my laptop, all my camera equipment. I like to actually take a picture on my phone. And it's like, okay, this is what was stolen or whatever. But if they steal your phone too, well, then now you're kind of screwed.
Yeah, well, that's where you need backups to the cloud with all that stuff.
Exactly. Mine backs up automatically. Yeah. All the time.
One thing to watch out for with insurance, since we're on this subject, is that if you start to earn money with your equipment, watch out, because your household policy will not cover that equipment anymore.
Correct. They'll have to be under commercial then.
Yeah, then you have to go get a commercial policy. So you got to be real careful if you play the edges of that, oh no, I was using it as a hobby, not as making money somewhere, because otherwise they won't cover that.
Yeah, I don't know where their cutoff is. If it's just a hobby and like, okay, I only get paid, let's say $100 or something like that. I don't know what they consider a hobby and what they consider really.
That's a good gray area that you got to be careful with. So you got to know what your policy says.
$100 should be okay.
Yeah.
I thought the switch though was more from just covering your equipment to covering the liability for your business.
Well, that too, but it also, if you read your homeowner's policy, I know it has somewhere in there that if you are using this for commercial purposes, it will no longer cover it, because it's now not considered a hobby, but a profession. And it may not take much money for it to kick it over into that area. So just be careful.
$200.
Yeah. You know, if something happens to it and you're doing it for somebody and getting paid, I would say, you know, well, I'm just doing this as a favor or something, and they're reimbursing me or some way to do it. But once it starts to be a regular money-making thing, you really need to switch that insurance policy to a commercial policy, which then PP of A or ASMP, which is the other organization that has equipment insurance, both of those will cover it as a commercial photographer.
But if you're shooting commercially too for a business, remember the IRS. You get your 1099s, you got to file those.
Yeah.
The other aspect of shooting for profit.
Yeah. As soon as you make more than, I think, $500 a quarter, or it might be 500 a year, 600 a year.
It's 600 like a year.
That. Yeah. So, yep. All the fun stuff to watch out for.
Running a special $4.99.
Yeah. Well, it's simpler if you're going to shoot at all or be a photographer and earn any kind of money. It's simpler just to turn yourself into maybe an LLC. You can set that stuff up yourself pretty easily. But, you know, then you get all this other stuff that starts to get into taking away your profits, because you add the insurance and everything else that comes along with running a business. Choose up your profits real fast. And then if wherever you live, find out that you're running a business in your home, there's generally more fees that come up, and then you got personal property tax that they come and get you for. All the fun little things of running a business. So. Oh, is chat disabled again? I got to find that in the back end. Somewhere. Yeah. Chat should now work for everybody. Sorry about that. I need to put that in my checklist. I have to go over and click a thing on the chat to make it work again. Okay. Oh yeah, Ken Cena said he's photographed weddings for 36 years. Ken, I give you credit for that. 35 weddings a year. That's a lot. That's a lot of work to do a wedding. Man. And it's not just the one day, because you got all the processing of all those files.
Yeah, the few I've done over the years, you know, and I always told people it's more like 40 hours worth of work. It's not just that one day. It's you know, all your post-processing or back in film days, you're calling and editing and putting albums together. I mean, there's so much work to it. And when people say, well, how come wedding photographers charge so much? You know, how can this guy will do it for, you know, $50 and give me a CD, and then, you know, labs or professional studios will charge, you know, $1,500, $2,000, $2,500 or more, you know. It's a lot of work. You just think about if you were working 40 hours at your regular job, you know, what are you making, and why doesn't the photographer deserve to make that kind of money as well?
Yep.
And then you think of all the front end work, the planning, the meetings with the clients and all that stuff. I mean,
oh, absolutely. You're right, Brian. I mean, I mean, 40 hours minimum, I would say. It's just each wedding, Ken says each wedding was approximately 50 hours of work. So yeah, I believe that to be accurate.
Well, then how expensive all your equipment is too. I mean, this camera, I mean, you need 2 cameras. One camera is just not enough. You need multiple cameras, multiple equipment. You know, it's a ton of money.
Lighting equipment, and, you know, and not to mention, you know, all your years of training and education. And, you know, I mean, you don't just pick up a camera one day and say, I'm a wedding photographer. Like anything, you have to learn your craft.
Sometimes you need 2 people.
Yeah. Most of the time you do, Brian. Yeah.
No, I totally agree.
Yeah.
No, that's why I used to assist for this one photographer for quite a bit. And it taught me that I wasn't built for wedding photography. It's a long first, that full day, it can be a long 8-9 hour day, just the shooting of it. And then all the post-processing and meetings.
Put in a 12-hour day.
Yeah.
A couple times I did. I put in a 12-hour day as an assistant.
Yep.
Start in the morning, and then you're through the wedding, and then you've got the party in the evening.
And there's not a whole lot of breaks in between for the photographer. So
yeah, you're always on the go. It's like you don't even have time to even eat, you know, because you're like, well, you could miss a moment.
And then a lot of places take away the food too. And then if you haven't eaten yet, that happened to me once at a wedding. I was like, yeah, could I just get a little bit of food?
Yeah.
Before I drive home. Yeah.
No, you got to be careful. I mean, it sounds funny in that. I mean, I've done that where, you know, a couple of times you go hiking for hours, like, you know what, I'm ready to pass out. I'm so hungry.
Right. Well, I had a wedding once down where I was assisting and it was down at the lakefront in July, and it was a hot, sunny day. And I almost passed out. I had to literally stop shooting because I was so dehydrated and everything, and I was so hot. And I ended up, and they had no water out there. Nobody had any, even like the place where it was didn't have any water out for anybody.
Oh, there was a whole lake there.
Oh, I know, right? So, yeah, it was really bad. And right after it happened to me, I like sat down, got a glass of water, you know, found a glass of water, put wet something from my bag, put it around my neck, and then the main shooter, she came over and she just looked completely drained, and we still had the rest of the wedding to do. It was like, okay. So it was really bad. It was a bad day. So yeah.
No,
I always carry water in my bag now. No matter what, I have water.
Yeah, you really have to plan. It's like for any photo outing that you do, you need to plan that stuff out and make sure you have a lot of that kind of stuff around. Ken always laughs at me for all the equipment that I bring when we go on a trip and all the other stuff. We have bags of liquids in our car. I've got snacks in our car for if we're hiking in case you need that. I have a full car when I go on any kind of photo outing. And it's because I believe in backup equipment and all that and being prepared for the weirdest things to happen. And every time something else weird happens, I add something else. Now I added a saw in the back of my truck because we ran across a trail that we couldn't get through because a tree fell across it. And all we needed was a lousy little handsaw to cut open enough of a path for us to get through. And it had a bunch of us blocked, and we were trying all sorts of things trying to get this thing. Finally, I found enough rope in my car that we could drag it over. Mm-hmm. And then everybody could get through one way and the other. But so now I throw a fold-up saw in the back of my truck. So
when you say a fold-up saw, it's funny because I got a fold-up wagon when I do the photography up at Oshkosh for the Air Adventure for the airplanes. I throw all my camera equipment in my wagon, and that it's like hauling it, you know, like with Rambo, carrying all my equipment. It's like, you know, forget this idea. And that I just got a wagon and threw my camera equipment in there, my chair, my umbrella, all that stuff. That helped out a lot.
I love taking my foldable wagon anywhere. It's great.
It saves your back and arms and everything.
It really does.
God. You can you know, put your cooler in there for drinks and soda and water, whatever, food.
Yeah.
Hey Jeff, that'd be a good topic for a future meeting. My favorite wagon, you know, for here.
What you put in your wagon.
That's my favorite wagon. They're probably some better than others.
Sure. Well, okay, it's 11 o'clock. I think we beat insurance and how to do some of this wedding stuff and everything else quite a bit. Oh, I had one thing that I was just going to mention that Barry had mentioned in the Q&A, that if you use your car for commercial stuff, make sure that you got to watch that for the insurance bit as well. That can cause some problems. Yeah, so I'm just clearing out the Q&A, and I want to welcome Jamie's been here listening to us and chimed in a couple times. Welcome, Jamie, to our group. You can see how we can get off on strange tangents, as we were talking about before we got started. We never know where this group goes, but it's always interesting and that. So I'm glad to have you come and you talk about infrared photography. I saw, I think it was Mary that turned me on to your website, if I remember right, and saw all the neat stuff that you had done, some of the different ways that you use infrared photography and regular photography even. So it's great that we could have you on, and maybe you can tell a little bit more about yourself to the group. I don't have your bio in front of me, although they've all seen your bio pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, if you've read my bio, you know, those are always funny to write, you know, yeah. Take it down to a couple paragraphs. But so you're not going to go with the name pronunciation?
Oh, yeah, you want me to try Jamie Karnarski Davidson.
There you go.
Hey.
Cool. Okay, so I guess a quick synopsis of me is that I prefer outdoor and nature, anything that's outside. I also do indoor still lifes and work on Lightbox and macro and close-up. I do a little bit of everything, and I would probably put everything except people. The second wedding I did cured me of that forever. And it's not that I cannot do people, but it's not my Calgon. It's not the thing that just really takes me away. So outdoor nature, wabi-sabi, landscape, scenic. My style I would call interpretive rather than documentary. I think anybody who's looked at anything that I post on Facebook or that is on my website is clearly not what the subject is, but really more, in my view, how I respond to it, how I connect to it, and what it's, quote, about rather than what it is. So that's me. I love infrared. I've been doing that for, gosh, I don't know, at least 10 or 12 years now. And I'm a Nikon shooter, simply because that's kind of where I started, and I like consistency. And after so many years, you accumulate enough equipment that it's really, from my view, not worth switching to another brand. I like what I have, and it works for me. So I guess with that, I'll just share my screen and start sharing about infrared photography. And if anyone has any questions, I'm going to suggest that you put it in the chat, and maybe Jeff, if you could chime in when there's any kind of question that needs to be answered right away. This is not something where I can't be interrupted, so I'm happy to answer questions. And you can email me afterwards if you decide you have more questions that are specific to your own equipment or whatever. And just to, a little plug, I do lead workshops all over the East Coast, and I have one in particular scheduled for June that's focused solely on infrared, and it's in the Blue Ridge area of North Carolina. So with that, I will go ahead and get started. Hopefully that's enough.
Yep, that sounds good. And Yeah, anybody put everything in the Q&A for me. It's easier to watch than the chat. So just throw it in there. Chat should be live now though as well, because
and I'm trying to move that box that you can't see on my screen. Anyway, can you see the mouse?
Yeah, we can see your mouse.
Right. So I'm going to move it out of the way. But this program, I love flowers and gardens. And so I titled it In and Out of the Garden simply because you're going to see a little bit of both. But anyway, the whole idea behind infrared photography is that it's a different way of seeing the world, just simply because of the way the infrared converted cameras and filters translate the light, the wavelengths of light. And what I have found is that I love infrared because what that convinced me of when I first started was that well, of course, there really is no such thing as bad light. There just is different light. But I can shoot all day long. And so when I'm out photographing, I do not want to stop. I don't care about eating or napping. So for me, when I'm out for the day, I'm out for the day and I'm shooting and snacking. What we see with infrared is anything just about that our eyes cannot see. So it sees, Anyway, you'll see as we go along. But what our eyes see is what is visibly in front of us. And what infrared sees are the things that are sort of hidden from our visible light view. So for me, why infrared? Well, number one, it does provide a different way of seeing ordinary scenes and subjects, and really kind of transforms them in a lot of ways. And that's one of the things that I like. I've already mentioned about there's no such thing as bad light. It also stretches our way of seeing the world a little bit differently and creatively, and sort of pushes open the translations that we're able to imagine. And a lot of infrared has an ethereal or otherworldly feel. So infrared cameras and the filters see what regular cameras in our eyes cannot. So this is where I started. I told you I'm a Nikon shooter, and I always have been. But a friend of mine, Mark Hilliard, who goes 50 years plus back in photography, came up to me one meeting that we were at, and he said, "You need to be shooting infrared. And I'm going to send you a Canon camera converted to 590 nanometers. And, my response to that was, okay, I don't even know what a nanometer is. So, why do I need to be shooting this infrared when I have no clue what you just told me? But I said, well, okay, I'll try it. And that's, one of the things is like, I may not like it, but I'm going to try it. So he shipped me a Canon 20D and it was converted to 590 nanometers. And one of the things I noticed, excuse me, was that obviously it was very different. What I was seeing on the LCD screen was very different from what I was seeing in front of me. And it didn't have a an RGB histogram, so I really wasn't clued in on some of the intricacies of what to look out for. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but I shot this camera for several months, and I'm like, okay, so I have all these pictures, so what do I do with them? The first half is the shooting, the second half is the processing, and it's not like, well, if you want to, you can just convert everything to black and white, and then what's the point, right? You've got white leaves on the trees and grass, and that's it. But this 590 captures a range of visible light, so it's a mix of visible and infrared, and so these were this was my first image processed in infrared, and I use Photoshop, Nik software, and an Action to swap the channels. But this series right here is the result of being taught by someone whose approach to color in general is far more subtle than mine is. So the first one you see is the false color interpretation, and then the second two are variations of black and white. This is my way of seeing the world. I love color. I can appreciate black and white tremendously, but I'm first drawn to color. So the one thing that infrared did for me, and still does, is it allows me to see what a scene will look like in black and white, which I never could before. And part of that was because on the back of the LCD of the Canon at 590 and my own Nikon D90 converted to 590 nanometers was that it looked like a negative. So what it did is it stripped all the color away and it left the bones of the subject. And so infrared really helped me to see the world far better and more effectively and efficiently in black and white. In this image, it looked like a negative, but I loved the bones of the trees, and I made all those colors. So that's kind of this, you know, like having just a bunch of crayons or paintbrushes and making the colors. The purple and the orange and the yellow on the bottom is the water, and the back part, the lighter yellow, is across the water. This too was an early false color infrared. This was a scene that in the middle of the day was very harsh. You can see the strong shadows. I made the colors on the building. I decided what color the chairs would be. I'm glad that I stopped even in this bad light. I'm going to put that, just know that when I say bad lights, it's in quotes. But I'm glad that I stopped and I photographed this scene, because this building, the chairs, everything about it is gone. It's an empty lot now. So that's one lesson, is that, you know, if you shoot in infrared, the light that would normally be totally terrible for color is really wonderful and usable in infrared. This is on the Blue Ridge in Virginia, and it had just rained, and then the sky opened up with super bright light. I tried to photograph this tree in color, and it just, the range was just way too harsh and stark and too bright in the sky. And so nothing really was working. And I said, oh, this is perfect for infrared. And it is. And so that's where, since I've been doing it for at least 10 or 11, 12 years now, that's when I can recognize when a scene will be better in infrared based on the light conditions, and also just a different way of seeing. This too was another situation where, and this is with the Nikon D90 at 590, where I started out with my color camera. I walked about this far onto the boardwalk, and the light was again super harsh. And I said, oh, I'm going back to the car and getting my infrared. And this worked. So this, I think I mentioned to Jeff that I'm not a technical person. And this, when I looked at this chart, I'm like, oh gosh, this is a technical thing and I don't know how to explain it. Well, basically, this is what our eyes see. And so you see the wavelengths that range from, I don't know, I guess that's, violet through to red. This is what our eyes see. After 720, which is the standard infrared conversion, our eyes don't have sensitivity in the infrared wavelength range. So this is where our eyes fall. And this is where you see the color response of a digital camera. So remember the first chart, the hot mirror, this pink area is what our eyes and our cameras typically can handle. And then the rest of this is the range of the infrared into an area. I have filters down to 550, which I don't use. So I use between 550 and 590 and 850. So I have the range of the mixed color into the black and white and lots of filters in between. But that gives you an idea of the wider range of capture of light and wavelengths with the infrared. In terms of what you need to shoot infrared, the perfect thing, the most ideal thing in my mind is to have a camera converted either to a single wavelength or full spectrum. I'll get into that a little bit later. But the reason I feel that it's the ideal way is because for me, it allows me to shoot in a fluid way in the same manner that I look at a scene in color. I'm seeing it differently, but I know that I don't have to wait, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I don't have to pre-focus and set everything up and have it all together before I photograph one scene. You can use external filters for infrared, and they absolutely work. They're a little more challenging, but they work, and they particularly work well with the full spectrum conversions, which is where you choose wavelengths and you can change them with filters. And so that's it's a little more challenging for DSLRs, but it's not impossible. And it's much easier than taking your color camera and putting an infrared filter on the front of it. You do need to understand the wavelength options for choosing a conversion or a filter. The understanding of white balance, the importance of it in infrared, post-processing workflows, they vary. I will give you sort of a brief sense of how I do it, but there's more than one way to skin a cat, and there's plenty of different ways to process infrared images. I will say that I have had the most success with mine in terms of going from, say, a 590 nanometer, which mixes visible color, into the black and white by following certain steps, and you'll see that. And the last thing is, just to be open. When I sort of poo-pooed that I should be shooting infrared because I didn't know what it was, and didn't even understand what a nanometer was, being open to trying it helped me a lot, and I actually loved it. So experimenting and just stepping out of the color comfort zone. So this is what's in my bag. I did start out with the D90. A friend, a very nice friend, gave me a D800 that he had dropped and thought it couldn't be fixed, which I found out could be fixed for $150. So I converted it. That was my second camera. I converted it to 850 for complete black and white. And then I used to work at a camera store, and Canon had some awesome deals for the staff. And so I got a Canon RP with a lens, with the adapter, for about $500. And that was my first step into the mirrorless. And I converted it to full spectrum so that I could use the filters. And then I got tired of the buttons being different. So that's when, after I learned that I had a Z6, Nikon Z6, and I had it for color. But when I learned from other Nikon shooters who had converted their cameras that it worked really well for infrared, I converted that and I got a Z6 II. So this is all the stuff that I don't carry it all, okay? I carry the Z6 and my Z6 II, But I have these other cameras for loaners, and also if I just want to, you know, sort of go back to a past, I don't know, if I want to look back in history and get one of these cameras out, they're there. But infrared, I can tell you that if you do it, you already know this, and if you haven't done it and you try it, it's addictive. Again, I can shoot all day. The ordinary becomes more interesting and sometimes extraordinary. It allows you to see in monochrome, which was one of the things that was, you know, a game changer for me. And in post-processing, particularly in the 720 and below, you can do anything you want. So what you're looking at here is a 590 nanometer image, and I have made all those colors. So I made the nets, the various colors that they are. It does not have to be crazy like my tree that I showed you. It can be sort of on the edge of realistic, but also look like, yeah, there's something a little bit different here. And so for me, it's just, I'm never going to stop. In terms of conversions, you have some choices. So one thing you can do is choose a single wavelength. If it were me, I would choose 590 because you can go from what you get out of the camera to the version where your channels are swapped to a false color version, which you saw, into the black and white. And when done, I shouldn't say my way, but when you do it in a particular way, you can generate super awesome black and white images. So if somebody says, well, I just like black and white, and so I'm going to get 850. If that's all you like, then that makes sense. But you've got lots of different options. And this chart here just kind of goes from what you would get from the camera with a good custom white balance down the line to the channels that are swapped to the black and white versions to what you would get out of the camera if you just used auto white balance. So if you look at the two outside columns, you'll see why you want to achieve a good custom white balance, because who wants to look at the red images or the pinkish and the purple? They don't work for me. There are ways around that too, if your camera will not white balance, but that's kind of a snapshot of you choose a single one, and that's the conversion that your camera has. If you convert a camera, whether it's a DSLR or a mirrorless, full spectrum conversion is an option. And I find that to be a very flexible option because the hot mirror is removed and you add a filter at whatever wavelength you choose, depending on your mood or what you're going for. And so you change the wavelength with the filters. And in doing that, you also have a hot mirror filter. Well, the hot mirror filter is when you want to go from shooting infrared to color. You put that on and you basically can shoot your back shooting color. So it's a way to have one camera with two different approaches of photographing. And with the full spectrum, you can choose only the filters that you're interested in. So you don't have to buy everything and you're not stuck with one particular choice, which is why I have full spectrum, because I like having choices. I work mostly with Kolari Vision. Well, actually, totally now. I have had conversions done with LivePixel. They're a great company. I work mostly and solely now with Kolari Vision because I find that they are very innovative and they're always coming up with some new thing. So here it is. I'm looking at a Z7. Doesn't matter. It's a Nikon mirrorless. And in the next frame, you see a very small, it's the size of a filter case, basically, a good size, maybe 4x4 or a little bit bigger, but there's room for 4 filters. And those filters, they call them the clip-in or drop, and they just, you drop them right above the sensor. They stay in because there's a magnetic thing on these filters. And that's how you change your wavelength. And so if I have two cases that can fit in my pocket, I can have 8 filters and change my wavelength at will. Now, you might say, well, yeah, but you have to open up your camera to the elements with the sensor. Well, guess what? People do that when you change your lenses. So what's the difference, right? If you use good technique for changing your lenses, use the same good technique changing the filters, and you're good. And we have schmutz removers in Photoshop and Lightroom. So this is the system that I currently use and don't see myself changing because of the flexibility. This is a series that I made with the Canon RP some time ago, and the clue is the MG in the file numbers. But this runs through what the filters look like with good or decent white balances. So you see on the top row, it's 550, 590, and 665, which is a nice balance in between the 590 and the 720. The second row is the 720, 850, and a filter that I still don't understand, but they call it IRVI. And then I put the hot mirror on, and so there's the color. And then this is the last frame is the IR chrome. Well, the reason it looks like that and not how it looks like when I do it now is because I white balanced that filter on green grass, just like I did all the others. What I have found is that with the chrome filter, I need to white balance on a neutral subject, either like a road or an old fence, something more in the grayish tone, and it's more vibrant and works better for me. So these are the in-camera custom white balances. And this chart here, I'm not going to go through it, but this is a way of helping you make choices in terms of what filter or wavelength you might like to choose. Anyone has any questions about these, feel free to email me. Now, I am going to argue with this chart because if you look at the 590, super good false color and good black and white. Well, you'll see. I think it does a pretty darn good job if you do your processing in a way that makes that possible. So I would say that 590 is super flexible. But then think about, and I have to do this with Lens Babies also. I'm a Lens Baby ambassador. If that tells you anything, I've got lots of Lens Babies and I've got lots of filters and cameras for infrared. So 2 very different approaches for photographing. But I use this technique in both instances. So because I'm full spectrum and because I use filters, sometimes it's, I'm like, well, what filter did I use? So I came up with the craft stick method, and I actually have attached them with a chain, and they're in my bag. And so what I do is I photograph the stick, and then everything that follows the stick is in that wavelength. And when I change a filter, change a wavelength, I photograph the stick again. And so at least then I know, okay, I changed the filter and that's why these look different, and it has nothing to do with that the light changed. So a tip for keeping track of wavelengths. This is an early false color with the 590. Black and white with 590. And here's a really good example of what convinced me that I absolutely needed to embrace infrared. I have photographed for at least 15, probably longer years, these set of painted barns that are were painted by artists. In the beginning, there were like 17 painted barns and buildings, and the artists came from all over, and they're very unique, let's put it that way, but I love them. And so I photograph them at least once or twice a year. It's a couple hours away, so I have to make a point of going there, but I'm at this barn. And in previous visits, the barn was standing up. And I look at this and I go, this is the last time I'm going to see this barn up. The color, the light was really just too harsh where the sun was, and the color just was terrible. So I got the infrared camera out, 590. This is the version of false color. And, you know, it's okay, but it's not really all that attractive. So I converted it to black and white. Now I can live with this image, this barn, and remember it in a way that if I only had my color, it would be really hard to create this image and love it. But it created a memory that I wouldn't have had if I was shooting color. A different way to photograph Sparks Lane in infrared and false color. So there's some challenges in photographing infrared that you have to overcome them, or you have to accept them for what they are. So the biggest thing is hotspots, and the hotspots are big. Sometimes they're big, sometimes they're small, but spots that are distinctly lighter in the center of your frame. They are not lens flare. They are the result of the way the light bounces through different lenses. And so if you're thinking about shooting infrared or converting a camera, the camera's not the problem. What you need to be paying attention to are the lenses that you choose for infrared. Some are absolutely terrible for hotspots, and I would say if you're really committed to shooting in infrared, don't use them and invest in a lens that is in the good or great for infrared. Kolari has a page on their website that lists for various brands what are good and what are bad, where they get bad, or where they're good up to in terms of an aperture setting. So that's a good thing to check before you go ahead and say, well, I'm going to convert and I'm going to use this lens because this is my favorite lens. Your favorite lens may not be the best choice for infrared photography. Can you manage hotspots? Yes. The first thing is obviously not shooting with a lens that's bad and notorious for hotspots. You can shoot at wider apertures, and just like if you think about how when we shoot at f16, f22, if we've got a dirty sensor, all those spots show up. And when you shoot the same subject at a wider aperture, they're not so obvious or they disappear. And then the third thing is to invest in Capture One and a lens cast calibration diffuser. And you'll see coming up a little bit about that. So here's what a hotspot looks like, right? I can manage this to a degree, mostly because it's busy. I've tried to use Photoshop and all kinds of things, burning, dodging, masking. And so far, I haven't really found an efficient way to deal with hotspots that are far more obvious than this. So I have a lens. I'm an Nikon shooter. My all-time favorite lens for shooting infrared is the 24 to 120 f4 lens. It's an EF lens, and it works perfectly. I have shot long exposures, f16, f22, and not dealt with hotspots. This here is what I'm talking about with the diffuser. So Mamiya used to make this, and that's discontinued. The alternative you can get at this website And how it works is that when you're in the field and you're using a lens that is notorious for hotspots, and you still want to use that lens, you take a picture. Manual focus, you take a picture with this diffuser in front of the lens, and then you continue shooting regular. When you go into Capture One, there's a process where you sync and that hotspot disappears. I don't do this, but I have seen it in action and it does work. So it's another option. Here's another hotspot that you can see. It's very small, but I'm at f/22 and it's very tiny, but because I know what to look for, and this is on that diffuser, right? I see that there is this very slight, but at f/22 and with what I'm looking at here, I'm not worried at all. And because it's so small at f/22, wider apertures are not going to be a problem. But that's even when I say no hotspots, there's a slight one. Here's that same image, which was shot at 850 nanometers, the black and white range, converted to black and white using Silver FX Pro, the NIC, and then staying in the NIC to get a little bit more ethereal glow. I went into Color Efex Pro and added Glamour Glow. I don't do that with all my images, but when I have forest scenes or grasses that I think really warrant, for my taste and my translation, this glowy effect, that's one way to do it. Using reverse clarity can also do it to a different degree. What I like about using Glamour Glow, and you can layer the Glamour Glow, is that you can go back with control points and remove that glow off of areas, where with clarity, I don't think that you can go into a more targeted adjustment. Another thing is that if you're shooting with wavelengths below 720, you want to turn your RGB histogram on and you want to watch the red channel. So if the red channel is going up the goalpost and clearly there's more information on the other side of it, you want to underexpose, because the blown out red channel is similar to the blinkies with color photography, and you're losing information. If you're shooting in RAW, yes, you can tone that down and get the information back, but it's better to just be aware as you're shooting that you want to keep the red channel, regardless of what your exposure looks like, inside the goalposts. Just makes life easier. If your camera does not have an RGB histogram, like the Canon 20D did not, the Nikon D70 does not. Just knowing that the red channel is slightly to the right of the luminance display will help you pull back the exposure and have far less blown out red channels. So that's a way to overcome it. And then, you know, we've got issues regardless of whether it's infrared or color. Noise, using super high ISOs if there's low light and you don't want to go with high ISO, and older cameras. Even at 400 ISO sometimes will generate noise. The Topaz denoise works. And here's an example of that. So left and right comparison, maybe you can see the difference, but I think that when you see the detail, that's just using Topaz denoise, the AI. So very noisy here, right? And without zooming in, you might not pick up on the noise, but this cleans it up tremendously. And so that's another way to overcome a general issue. Any questions so far? I see you, Jeff, so you can shake your head if there's none.
Yeah, no, so far we don't have any questions.
Okay.
I got somebody asking me if Q&A is working, but it should be working. It was working throughout the whole thing. So,
well, I'm going to keep going then.
Yeah, so keep going. It's good so far. You got me hooked.
Okay. So the question is, what do you look for in subjects? Really, honestly, you can shoot anything in infrared that you can shoot in color. It may have a different look and a different effect, and you might not like it. But landscapes, scenics, architecture, barns and buildings and old cars and tools and graphic elements, cityscapes even. Macro, I am working on tapping into, I love flowers. So I am tapping into combining infrared and lens baby. And so that's sort of a little mini project that I have in my head, and now I just need to start doing it. People can look good or they can look really crazy. So infrared can see below the skin, and so it can pull out veins. The eyes look sort of vacuous and dead. So, you can do people. They're just, you may or may not like the way they come out. If you have green grass, a water element, and clouds, that's sort of the trifecta. If you're photographing and it's raining or it's misting or it has rained, that wetness, the moisture and weather events adds even more drama to infrared. So if it's raining and you've got a way to cover yourself up, or if it's just rained, go out and photograph something somewhere, because it really has another completely different look, just more juice. These are clouds in the mountains. This is on the Blue Ridge, so here we've got green, there's no water, so what? We've got good clouds. And same thing here, no water, so what? We've got landscape, so mountains, shadows, clouds, cropped, in this case, to a panorama. I love trees. It's probably, after flowers, it's a battle between trees and barns and old trucks. But I've loved trees, and I'm underneath this tree. And this is one translation of this tree with false color. And I really like it, but I went back to an image in this series of the same tree and I processed it again. When we reprocess images or reprocess images that are in a series, we sit down with a different mindset. And so I did the same tree in a different way. And I like this, this is completely different. So two different, obviously this is more subtle, a little bit more colorful, but that's something to also recognize, is that whether you're shooting color or infrared, how we interpret the image and process it is really subjective. I do not photograph or process images so that they'll win a competition, or that they'll get a good score, or that people will like them. I do my photography for myself, and everybody else and everything else comes later. So, if you're concerned about, well, nobody will like it, write down this phrase. So what? So what? Who cares? So what? These are opinions, right? If you're shooting for a client, that's a whole different ball of wax, right? But if somebody doesn't like what you do, too bad. If you like it, you're good to go. These are live oaks down on the Georgia coast. And this is an infrared on the Outer Banks. This is at 590, and it's not wildly, crazily processed. You could almost wonder, but for the sky, you'd be like, well, I don't understand the sky, but I understand the water and the reeds, the marsh grasses. This is false color. infrared on the Outer Banks also. Probably 590 nanometers converted to black and white. And then this is the chrome filter. So this is the IR chrome. And what I was talking about in terms of getting a white balance off a neutral subject, I actually tried the Rode and it worked okay. But when I did it on the fence, it worked better. And so this is really just about straight out of camera. And I like this color far better than when I was experimenting and white balancing on green grass with the Canon RP. Had nothing to do with Canon. It had everything to do with what I chose to white balance on. This is in the Blue Ridge. These are two trees. These two trees are photographed by everyone. So how do you make a subject that is photographed by everyone look different? Well, infrared is one way, black and white interpretation, another. This is in Valley Cruces. This is down in Georgia. Now, this is 850 nanometers. So this is the black and white down in Georgia. Same here. This is Darien, 850. And I use creative techniques. So I use ICM or motion blurs, whatever you want to call it. And so this is the false color interpretation on the top and the black and white on the bottom. So you're not limited. This is from Old Car City down in White, Georgia. And, you know, I can't tell you that I could repeat this the way I process this image. I mean, I could eventually, but this was just one of those going with the flow. Once I'm into the false color phase of processing, I'm going with the flow and I'm just kind of playing. And I think that's important. But what I can tell you is that this looks absolutely wonderful printed on metal. I'm looking at it to my side. These are some other cars down in Old Car City. So this is a false color version. And here's the black and white. I like the black and white better. Sometimes I like the false color. Other times the black and white is the version that I like, but I process for all of them. Here's 850 nanometers with a dahlia. And then I sprayed some water on it and added a macro adapter and did this. So this is what kind of sort of pushed me into looking at doing more of this kind of stuff. Long exposures, that's another one of my favorite ways of shooting. And so can you do long exposures in infrared? Absolutely. You just need to know that there's a difference between a 10-stop ND filter for color and that same 10-stop ND in infrared. 10 with a lot of filters becomes 7. You have to test that out. But so I've named a couple of filters that 10 is 10. So Kolari Vision has ND filters that are what they say they are, whether you shoot in color or infrared, and Breakthrough photography filters are the same way. So if you're not sure of if you have an infrared camera, if your ND filters, if a 10 stays 10, test it out and you'll see. And if you don't want to buy another filter and you're happy with, say, 7, then you just expose for 7 stops instead of 10, and you'd be much happier. And again, look for those opportunities that abound: clouds, water, trees, graphic stuff. But really, for long exposures, you want something that's stable as a visual anchor, and then something that's moving, that you're making the effect come alive. So this is in the eastern shore of Virginia, and this is at f22 with a 10-stop during the day.
We got a couple questions. Maybe I'll
Okay.
break in here.
Okay.
We got Keith Lisk is asking, what do you see through the viewfinder or the EVF when using the filters?
Okay.
And does autofocus still work? So, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe.
So if you're shooting with a DSLR, when you put a 10 stop on, you're not seeing anything. Okay. In terms of long exposures. If you are just shooting with a converted DSLR, when you look through the viewfinder, you're seeing color. So you have to take the picture before you see what it looks like in infrared.
Okay.
And with the mirrorless up to 10 stops, you can not only see through the viewfinder the effect of the filter that you're using, but at least with my Z6 II, it'll autofocus. It'll autofocus, which is really, really convenient and fun.
Yeah.
If you're shooting with a DSLR, it will not autofocus through a 10 stop. So you have to get your base exposure, set things up, put your filter on, flip to manual focus, right? You can use autofocus with color. Make sure you switch to manual focus so that your focus doesn't change. Put the filter on, calculate your exposure, and take the picture.
Okay, yeah. And then the other question we have is more general. What is the general way you are getting the false color? Is that something?
That's in post. That's in post, and okay. I'll show you some of that just a little bit later on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
okay,
you'll see that.
Yeah. And this last question, which do you disclose if it's an infrared image when you exhibit?
Well, I don't. Yeah, I mean, I don't exhibit a whole lot. I haven't in a long while, but yeah, I don't. There's no reason to hide anything.
Yeah, and in competitions, that gets to be a problem. I know sometimes when we've had competitions and people put infrared in, the judges don't understand it, and
no,
it tends not to do as well sometimes.
Yeah, that's why a lot of altered reality categories have been added for infrared, for textures, for creative post-processing. And you could have an infrared category. If there were enough people, participating and shooting that, why not? So.
Right, and most of our rules would let you enter an infrared. It's just that so far the judges don't always see infrared as an artistic thing, I guess.
Well, then I would say you need different judges.
Yeah, well, we have unfortunately sometimes judges that are too ingrained in certain sets of rules, and we constantly look for better judges than that, but a lot of the judges aren't trained with infrared in mind, and they should be.
Well, it's, again, it's just a different way, black and white. Well, black and white is interpretive anyway,
right.
In terms of how you process, in terms of the filter that you use on the front of the camera, if you do, I mean, it's again, it's about opinions, and we know about opinions. So that's all I'll say.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, that's it. Yep.
All right, so here are some long exposures. Something that if you do long exposures or you don't, and you're starting to try, one of the common things is to have clouds tracking across the sky, and water being smoothed out and things like that. But when you change your perspective and the clouds are coming towards you, it creates a whole different dynamic. So something to think about there. I talked about white balance being important. So most cameras, not all, but most cameras, you can achieve a custom white balance in your camera. The way you do it is different from camera to camera, and that includes different models within within the same brand. What I'll key you in on is that Adobe is disrespectful in terms of how it interprets what you did in camera, in color, but as well with the custom white balance. Capture One, if you're willing to and want to invest in it, or if you already have it, does honor your custom white balance. Obviously, the cost is that you have to buy it. The custom white balance gives you the best starting point, but it's not impossible to process an image effectively if that's not possible in camera. Some won't custom white balance, and that's where you can go in and use the white balance eyedropper, or you can create a custom DNG color profile. I think I've mentioned this, but if you change the wavelength, you need to re-white balance. So mostly that's with anyone using filters. So here's an example of what I'm talking about with, the disrespect. So on the left is my in-camera custom white balance. And because you see this little symbol up here, what that is telling me is that I have told Adobe that this is not what I want. This is the custom white balance. And I click a button and it gives me that because I've created a custom profile in Adobe. Okay, so that's the difference. You do all this really nice work and you go, oh, I can't wait to process this image. And then Adobe gives you the image on the right. So, I don't know why they can't, do something different, but. So white balance does matter. And typically I do a custom white balance on brightly lit green grass or foliage, properly exposed, so not blown out and not too dark. And what I learned from someone else is that if you defocus, it blends those tones in the green area. And I haven't tested before and after on that, but it makes sense that would work better. Let's see. I've already talked about re-white balancing if you change a lens or if you change a filter. If you're walking around and you've got a camera with the same lens, you're using it all day long, the lights changed, the subject changed and all of that, and you don't change the wavelength, you don't have to re-white balance at all. Okay, so just remember that. Using a lens hood is important. If your lens didn't come with it, if you've lost it, if you've broken it, get a lens hood and use it. A circular polarizer. Some people say, oh, it doesn't work on infrared. Well, it may not work on the higher, maybe it won't work on 720, but below 720, where you've got a mix of visible light, yes, it does. I know it does because I have used it. And the neutral density filters if you want to do long exposures. So here's the second half. You have all these images like I did. I had 3 months worth of infrared images and I'm like, I don't know what to do with these. Now what? What I use is Photoshop, the Nik software, and I have an action that swaps the channels. And I apply that. I am a Photoshop user. I'm not a Lightroom user per se, except to resize my images. But in Lightroom, you've got edit in, edit in, edit in. So when there's a need for you to pop out of Lightroom into Photoshop, particularly to, for whatever reason, the channel swap, for example, is one reason. Just do it and you can go back to Lightroom and do your thing. I process in triplets. So I have the raw file and I'll do basic processing on that because sometimes the raw file I really like just the way it is. So I'm going to process that as if that's my image. The false color is the next step. And you see I labeled it the party. That's where you create the colors and your interpretation of the scene, whether they're realistic colors, whether they're subtle, bold, crazy. That's the party. I save that. And then I process the black and white. So I don't go from the raw file to the black and white just because I like black and white and that's what I see the image. If I'm shooting at, lower wavelengths, even 720, I will do that middle step of the false color, regardless of how subtle it is, because it does make a difference. And I'm going to show you that. If you have an 830 or 850 monochrome black and white, you don't have to do any of the party because it's monochrome. So you can skip that step. So learning to process in threes, this is what I'm talking about. So on the top is the raw file, slightly processed. The second one is after the channel swap, and the third one is the black and white. Same here, right? So the middle one is the false color. All those colors that you see are the ones that I put there. Now, do you like that? You don't have to. It's not necessarily my favorite. There's, some things that I would probably change or want to change. But the idea is that I'm creating contrast, I'm creating different tones and adding structure and things like that. And so the black and white is where I went with this. But if I skipped the middle step and just went from the raw file to black and white, it would not look like this, because you can see that the raw file is very limited in contrast and differentiation of tones and structure. Here's another set, same idea after the channel swap and with false color. And then this is on the Blue Ridge, probably one of my favorite scenes. What you're seeing on the top is fog rolling over the mountain. So here's the initial image, the raw file. This is the false color, and here's the black and white. Can I reinterpret this black and white and look at it differently? Yeah, but I still will start here to go there. Here is a series where I show you the difference between taking the raw file and not doing the false color, and taking the raw file, doing the false color, and the end result. So this is the raw. There's the false color. That actually, aside from maybe the orange stuff on the bottom, could be real-ish, right? And here's what the scene looks like just from the raw file. That's the raw interpretation without that step that you just saw. Here's what that same black and white looks like using the same settings, but with the false color step. So I don't know about you, but that's okay. It needs work. That doesn't. Right now, I use Nik, so I choose different. I can either use the sliders and get my own results, or I can start with a preset or a recipe and go from there. But that to me is the value of doing those 3 steps. And initially, it might take you a while to learn, but once you get it, it's pretty easy. So in the gardens, right? We've got the flowers, trees, there are structures in gardens, a lot of different things that you can do in gardens if you have public or your own garden. This is Lewis Ginter Botanical Garden in Richmond. The first is the raw, the 590. The second is after the channel swap, right? So there's really 4 stages, but I just do the channel swap so I can get to the third image, which is the false color. And so that's the beginning. This is where I landed, and I actually love this black and white, converted it to black and white, and I definitely added Glamour Glow to this image, right? So where you land is totally up to you. This is again at Lewis Ginter with that same series, raw, channel swap, and false color to the black and white. So, right, here's one, and I went a little off the charts. I think I dipped into Topaz or Smart Photo Editor and went a little nutty. And you know what? It's good therapy to kind of go off the rails every once in a while. So, you know, would I enter this in a competition? Would I put this? I might put it in an exhibit just to, you know, kind of flip people out a little bit, you know, make them go, what in the world, you know? But here's your trees. These are all, you know, when you're looking at these, what you need to know is that have all gone through that process, those steps. I love the black and white here. The middle one, it's okay. And if I had maybe didn't put the orange in there, maybe I would have liked that, but I don't know, the black and white works the best for me. But I also like the raw. There's something in the quality and the tones of the raw file there that are also interesting. So I'm just kind of, you know, giving you examples of different ways to interpret. Same idea. So this is 590 raw, false color, and black and white. Another little sidestep, veered off the road. You know what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It only matters if it matters for a specific reason. So these are lily pads in the middle of the day, so fairly harsh lighting. Color was definitely not working. So that's the channel swap. And there you go. This looks kind of real-ish, right? Sort of, kind of, maybe natural, but not. I love the old barns, the rural landscape. And so using the technique of framing and also using, I think in Nick, the Silver Effects, this is like the antique or yellowed preset. And so it works sometimes. These are just examples of different subjects done differently. 590 nanometer there. 590 here. This was early in my infrared experience. And I would probably go back and change the purple in the sky, right? When you're first starting anything, you kind of go a little crazy sometimes and you're not tuned into everything. And I wasn't. But I really like this black and white. And I love that I photographed this tree in a cemetery down in Charleston, because this tree no longer looks like this. It's missing a limb, and it'll never be the same. But when I would go to the cemetery, I would say, I need to go to my tree, right? They're my trees that I share, but it's my tree. And I'm sad that it doesn't look like this, but I get to do it in a different way. West Virginia, railways are good, graphic elements. Down in Florida. So I'm looking at this tree and I'm loving the bones of the tree. And so I photograph it, and this, I believe, it's still 590 because this is early in my shooting. And it doesn't look great, right? This is the beginning, but I know that the bones and the curves of the trees and the contrast will turn into something not too shabby, right? Mm-hmm. So when you're looking on the back of your LCD and you're looking at this, you've got to keep in mind that the other half of the infrared shooting is the processing, and that's where you do your cropping, do your processing, and you know, make things come to life. So seeing potential is important. Opening your mind, that's the you know, cracking open the shell. So this is a scene using my D90 in the Smokies down a trail. I'm leading a group And everybody is like, oh my God, these are pink lady slippers, right? And so everybody's going in on the ones, the twos, the little clumps. And when they were all done and they were meandering down the trail a little further, I said, I'm just going to take a shot. And what I had in mind was, okay, everybody's got these solitary or really close pink lady slippers. Well, I'm going to shoot in infrared, and I'm going to shoot at f/22, and I'm going to show how deep these lady slippers go. And so this is infrared, 590 nanometers, and converted to black and white. So that's where the same subjects, when you're photographing in infrared, and I shoot them in color and infrared a lot. So I'll have my tripod set up and I'll shoot both at the same focal length, same settings, etc. Apalachicola. So here, what I've done is I've processed for the false color, went in and did the black and white, and then brought back out with blending some of the color. So where you want to go is up to you. I kind of like this festive, canal log and the foliage. This looks like gold, and it's just greenery. I don't even know what it's called, but it's on the top of a swamp. It's sitting in a swamp. Everybody else walked by. I thought, oh, I know what I can do with this, right? I can turn this sludgy, green, yucky stuff that nobody finds interesting into gold. This is Ocracoke Light, 720 nanometers. So you see 720 is a bit more subtle. That is why it's the standard conversion, because it's sitting kind of in the middle. I always felt that 720 was a fence sitter, but I am growing to appreciate it just as much as my other wavelengths. Oh, so this here, so this is infrared. This is probably 590 or 665. And you've got this blank sky. So this would be an image that when I photograph it, I would say, this is ripe for a texture, right? A different way of interpreting, because the blank white sky isn't really helping anything. And a texture with maybe an antique look would make this image work better. So you got to think beyond the pure. This is subtle for me, but it works. The other thing is you'll notice the clouds. What I typically do is use, Viveza, and I add structure to the clouds and desaturate. A lot of times desaturate, and it just seems to work a little bit better. Sometimes, this is desaturated. This is not what the clouds looked like completely. So it's another thing that you can try. And so that is what I have. The parting comment, I guess, is that with infrared, you never know exactly what you're going to see, how it's going to look in infrared. But if you do it enough, you can imagine, and you can also sort of have ideas on how you'll process it. If you photograph only one wavelength, then you get really good at anticipating what point A will look like and where you can go to in point B or C or D. This is a farm in the Blue Ridge also, and I have permission to walk all over the property, so that's always fun. Ask permission, establish relationships, right? I love barns, but I'm going to ask somebody if I can go on it, and especially if I'm bringing a workshop group, I'm going to make sure that I ask permission. I tell them when I'm coming, and I remove wires in the image, and I make a print, and I give them a print that they would not have. So that's sort of an aside, but this is one of the prints that I gave the owners of this farm. And you never know what. Well, I'd never seen the cows so close up to the fence, and I come with a group, and I'm going, oh crap, when are the cows going to go back in the fields where I never see them? And so we left, did some other things, came back, and the cows were gone, and a few donkeys also. But you just never know. And so I just want to say thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me to share. I appreciate that. And here are some links that you might find helpful. You probably know where to find me website-wise. I am an affiliate for Kalari Vision. If you have any questions, first of all, their website has tons of information if you want to learn more and really dig in. But if you have questions for me, just email me. And then if you want to learn more about different things that people are doing with their infrared images, this group right here on Facebook, I'm an admin. And so you have to answer 3 simple questions to get in. Ask permission. I will let you in. But the value of that, if you're on Facebook, is that one of the rules is that every person who makes a post needs to include the wavelength. You don't have to include, like what you did or anything like that, but the wavelength needs to be included, because then, at least on a visual level, people learn, oh, wow, I kind of like that. I might not like everything that Jamie showed because she's a little out there, with her color or whatever, but I like that there's this possibility. So it just gives you a lot of room to explore possibilities. So that's all I have. And I can unshare my screen, take a screenshot, or Jeff can forward this information to you. But yeah, anytime you have questions in general or specific, just reach out.
Okay.
I'm here to help.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
Go ahead.
When you said that you can talked about how you can specify the different wavelengths with the filters.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any tendency towards treating these infrared images like people, for example, are doing with focus stacking, where you take the camera, put the filter on, and use different filters, and then put part of the image in this wavelength and part of the image in that wavelength? Or even taking multiple images.
Yeah, I mean, you would have to take multiple images with the idea of mixing wavelengths. And there's no reason why you couldn't do that. In the same way that I haven't tried it, but I can't imagine that you couldn't focus stack. You're on a tripod and you choose your filter and get everything correct before you start stacking, and just use whatever technique you use and do it.
Is there a lot of that? I don't even know what to call it. Wavelength stacking, I guess, would be a name going on.
I've not seen people within a single image. Like, I wouldn't stack filters. I don't. Well, let's just say, okay, now that you've given me this idea, I might try it. Because why not? But in my head, I'm thinking, well, how do I white balance? Do I just use the white balance of the first one? And if I do that, and that's my system, and I slap another wavelength on, well, here's what I can tell you. I don't know what would happen because I haven't tried it in that way. What I have done is used the clip-in filters. So I had a clip-in filter in my Z6 at 665. And I said, you know what? I want to do this scene in 720 nanometers. So I put the 720 filter on the outside of the lens and I re-white balanced, and it worked perfectly to give me a 720 white balance. if I hadn't done that, I don't know, it just would have been a different look, I think. So I think if you're talking about mixing the wavelengths and the looks, I would take 2 different images or 3 or 4, whatever, and then blend them.
Or do, I mean, in focus stacking, we have the layers in Photoshop, and then we just mask out the parts of the image that we don't want to see. And I would think that if you had a beautiful tree and some wavelengths, and you wanted that to show up with a regular color in most of the photos.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Yep. But if you're thinking of stacking them in that way, you want to have the camera on the tripod, and you want to have everything the same. So keeping the focus, keeping the wavelength, or the focal length the same.
Right, which is might be hard to do because you actually have to take the camera off the tripod, change the filter.
No.
On the tripod. Well,
yeah.
The filter over there.
If it's an external filter, you just screw it on.
Yeah.
Well, okay, yes. If you're using 2 different cameras, then yes, you do have to take one camera off and put the other on. And you could do it. You could manage it. Just practice.
I was thinking with 2 cameras, it would be hard because they would, to make the image the same so that you could stack them, could pretty stack the layers. You could, 2 different cameras would turn out 2 different pictures.
Yeah. It's not impossible.
Probably if you used external filters, then you could change. Now, if it was a full spectrum camera, you could then just get the different external filters to get the different wavelengths.
Yeah.
So you could just unscrew one filter and screw the next one in.
Yeah. So with the idea of color and infrared, you could shoot the first frame using the hot mirror filter, and then subsequent frames using a different wavelength.
Yeah. So that might be a way that you wouldn't shift the camera, at least, because you could be changing filters.
Yeah.
We've got Jim Karofsky's asking, are the colors painted in with Photoshop with brushes, or are you just
I'm using Vivisa.
Okay.
Control points and copying and pasting and just, playing. I'm really just playing around.
Okay.
With some intention.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the 590 nanometer is referred to as the Goldie, and that's because when you're in that process of using, for example, a Vivisa control point on a particular area, what I'll tell you is that the formula for creating gold at 590 is you raise your red slider up, your green slider up, but not past the red, and then you bring down your blue slider, and that creates gold.
Okay. A lot to learn with all of it. Sounds like fun. I'm so close to doing it. I just can't quite get myself to convert a camera, but now you've got me thinking of buying a refurbished Z6 that I could convert. And
the Z6, I really love, number one, having 2 cameras that have the same buttons, and the Z6 white balances perfectly, and I've had no problems with it. So yeah, I'm very happy with matching cameras.
Yeah. Well, I'm using a Z6 for my webcam, so
there you go.
So I see they're pretty inexpensive nowadays for the refurbished ones on the Nikon site. You're under $1,000 for that body.
Yeah.
And that might be the way to go for me, at least. I knew I'd like you because you're a Nikon person, so there are not as many of us around anymore.
They're just boxes.
Yep.
They capture light, have the same basic buttons.
Yeah. I just like how Nikons work, but then I've been a Nikon guy since the 80s. So
I hear you.
Yeah. Should I change my webcam into an IR camera? That would give a different look for these Zoom meetings.
Well, what you could do is you could convert your Z6 to infrared full spectrum. And then when you're doing the webinars, you just put your hot mirror filter on.
Oh, hey, that might be a good way to do it. Hey, that would save me $1,000.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I would tell Jeff to put on his hot mirror with the video.
Yeah.
Put on your hot mirror.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, great.
So,
Anybody else have questions?
So Jamie, when I met you at the out of Chicago Botanic.
Okay.
And I borrowed one of your Kalari Vision.
Yeah, the pockets.
Cameras, the little pocket one. And I was sitting taking a picture, composing the picture. And I was sitting on the ground at the bridge by the in the Japanese gardens. And these two women came up and they were taking a long time crossing the bridge, a very long time.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, just cross the darn bridge.
Yeah.
So I ended up just, yeah, fine, I'm going to shoot it with them on it. And it was very interesting. So I know you don't take people pictures, but it was very interesting because one of them was dressed almost completely in black. And the other one was kind of in white, and then it was like really weird. Like one showed up and the other one didn't, and the one looked headless or had her head but no body, and it was very interesting. So yeah, so if anybody ever takes pictures of people, watch what they're wearing.
And I'll give you a heads up. So dyed hair and tattoos come out different. But also, if you're photographing someone on the beach and they have a black bathing suit, sometimes it becomes very sheer. Depends on the fabric.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So wear a cover-up.
Yeah, look out if you're photographing on the beach, huh?
You might be surprised.
Well, great. Yeah. Well, thank you, Jamie. This has been great. A lot of good information. We had probably one of our highest number of people watching today. I know I get kidded because I keep bringing people on for infrared, but I'm going to switch one of these days or add it to my system.
Yeah.
And yours with your trees and that. I love trees, so that really, the look, I really like. So I'll probably be making that choice. So, but
great.
Thank you, Jamie. Excellent.
Thanks for having me.
It was a fantastic presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.